So the first question for tonight is the image of a light beam that doesn't land on any surface at all. Here, the light beam means that ultimate consciousness and the surface is our sixth sense basis. Is question 1.
What's the question though? Is it the question is the image of the light beam not landing on any surface? And is the question, are the six senses the surface? Is that what it's saying?
Yes.
Yeah, you could say that. While we're still bound up with attachment to this body and mind, then we're stuck in this realm. We're all in the human realm here, and it's a sensual realm, Gama Loka, or we say Gama Vachara Bhumi, the sensual realm, the realm of the senses. And your mind keeps delighting in the senses. You have to remember when we use the word delighting, that includes when you have an unpleasant sense contact. You see or hear something you don't like or don't find pleasant. That's still delighting in your senses, meaning you'll react with aversion or pleasure, attraction or aversion. So, as human beings, we are sensitive. We have senses, and these are constantly being stimulated, and that's constantly stimulating craving of one kind or another, which stimulates and hardens into upadana, clinging attachment, which conditions more ignorance, more delusion, which conditions more craving, and so on. And so we call it a cycle, don't we? It's a cyclical thing. Our consciousness keeps getting attached and bound up with the sense of self that is stimulated by all this sense contact. But one who has completed the Noble Eightfold Path, they developed Sila, Samadhi, Panya, they brought their mind to really see through this sense of self. So then it's as if their mind doesn't have anywhere to alight anymore. They're not grasping at anything that can be known with the senses as self. And, if they reach Nibbana, then they're not even taking the immaterial world, say the immaterial world as in the arupa jhanas, as self or as a basis for attachment either. There's just nothing left for the mind to be deluded by and take as self. Even the very radiance of the mind itself, which we experience as the mind becomes more concentrated in samadhi, it becomes radiant, translucent, radiant, luminous. Even that we can get attached to, but the Arahant is no longer attached even to the radiance of the mind. They just practice their vipassana so thoroughly and fluently that the mind is just not touching on or alighting on anything as self or grasping at anything as self.
Sadhu. And the next question is, in the 5 indriya, does panya mean wisdom related to Dhamma, not necessarily meaning the intelligence in dealing with societal matters?
Yeah, in the 5 indriya, these are spiritual faculties, and panya means wisdom or insight and clear knowledge and vision of the way things are in light of the Four Noble Truths. So insight into suffering, knowing the cause of suffering and abandoning the cause of suffering, craving, realizing cessation of suffering and cultivating the path, knowing what is the path, what is not the path that leads to the end of suffering. That's wisdom. So this is spiritual wisdom. So somebody may have that wisdom and become fully enlightened and reach Nibbana, purify their mind of mental defilements, but they may not know a lot about the world. They may not. So, many, as I said many times, many of our teachers were from rural Thailand, and they were brought up with very little formal education, and they never traveled overseas, and they may never have watched TV or read that many books, so they really had very limited knowledge of the world outside, as it were, and yet they were complete in their practice of the development of the five indriyas, so their wisdom in terms of understanding the Four Noble Truths was complete. That's the best kind of wisdom, isn't it? What we call Lokuttara Dhamma, or wisdom that transcends the world, frees the mind, liberates the mind from suffering. That's the best kind of wisdom. And you don't necessarily have to know much about the world in terms of the normal knowledge of the world, how to make money, how to travel, you go around the world and know all the things of the world, the economy, geography, society, politics, all the different things that we normally associate with knowledge. You don't necessarily have to know all of that to free your mind from suffering. Some people do know a lot about the world, and they also can free their mind from suffering, but it's not essential. One thing also you notice, these practitioners who do free their mind from suffering have realized the Four Noble Truths. They gain a certain wisdom and understanding that can be applied back to the world if they need to. So, what everybody noticed about Luang Por Chah when he went to the West, say from Thailand for the first time, goes to England, and later he went to America. He understood those societies quite well, even though he had very little formal education or background in, he couldn't speak English, and he didn't know the societies that he traveled in. He was meeting things for the first time, people with different language, culture, society, and yet he seemed to understand them very well. So when you gain wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, understanding of the Four Noble Truths, you can apply that and understand many other things about the world quite well, if you choose to. Perhaps some practitioners don't choose to, they don't have much time for that. But if they do, they tend to be very smart and understand things quite well.
Sadhu Luang Por. The next question goes, there are a lot of online material where we might get lost, e.g. YouTube content about Buddhist practices. But can I know what is the step-by-step guide for Nirvana for someone new like me? Is it only breathing exercise? Do we have to practice any other Vipassana meditation as well, parallelly?
Best thing would be to find a teacher that you find you connect with, you feel confident to listen to them, follow their instructions. If you have a good teacher, that really helps. Of course, the Noble Eightfold Path is quite broad. If you study, good starting point is read some of the Buddhist suttas, the teachings, say like the Majjhima Nikaya, some of the main suttas, read them, and then maybe read some books that explain them a bit as well. So reading can help, but then have a teacher also who can give you direct instructions, they can save you a lot of time. As you say, there's so much available now in terms of online teachings, publications, videos, audio, everything. So a good teacher will help direct you maybe to listen to the useful Dhamma and then practice the useful Dhamma. The Buddha himself said, out of this practice of anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, the Four Noble Truths can be realized, the four foundations of Mindfulness can be completed. The Bojjhanga, the 7 factors of enlightenment, can be developed and completed. So mindfulness of breathing alone is enough to develop both samatha and vipassana, or calm and insight, and purify your mind. But that doesn't mean to say that necessarily is all you will do in terms of meditation. I myself use a lot of body contemplation, what we call a supagamatana or gayagata sati, which mindfulness of breathing is part of, but not. There's more to it than that. But there's other meditations and techniques we use as well, such as the cultivation of kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and so on. There are many different aspects of developing the mind in this Noble Eightfold Path, which a teacher can help guide you, because sometimes it depends on our personality, what we need, especially in the beginning. Some people need more of one thing than another. We need to see the value of precepts. We need to see the value of listening to the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma. There's different aspects of the practice which a teacher can help you with. I'd say it's all out there. There's enough out there to get what you need, get the information, get the instruction you need to practice for enlightenment. But having a teacher will help guide you, maybe steer you towards the good Dhamma and keep you on track when it is very easy to get lost, to stray, or get caught into wrong views, or just get misled or lost by either our own thinking or maybe hearing Dhamma that isn't correct. So a good teacher will help you. So try and find a teacher, or stick close to a teacher, I would say.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question is somewhat related. Today you mentioned about some monks who have become enlightened, which gives enormous respect to teachers by students, and students will naturally tend to follow them. But how do we know a teacher is enlightened? That will help us to find good teachers to follow.
Good question. And that's true. You don't know to start with. And the Buddha said, spend a lot of time listening to that teacher's instructions, learning from them, looking, see how they live, because they will set an example in how they live as well. And over time, you can get to know whether you can trust a teacher. If they don't lead you in the wrong ways, they don't manipulate you or harm you in various ways, then you'll start to trust them more and more. You may also compare notes sometimes, because there are luckily different teachers. And one thing you find is that good teachers, enlightened teachers, tend to teach fairly similar things. They tend to get the fundamentals right. They may have their own character and emphasize slightly different aspects or use language slightly differently, but generally they're teaching the same foundations of practice, the same principles, and you'll pick up on that over time. Through experience in the practice, you'll realize, say Ajahn Chah, one teacher, maybe another teacher, they're both pointing you in the same direction, teaching you similar things. And so you gain confidence from that. Or the Buddha's teaching as well. Obviously, you compare any living teacher or recently living teacher with what the Buddha said as well. So we do a certain amount of comparing, building on our understanding of the Dhamma through experience, comparing teachings. And if maybe when you read the Buddha's suttas and the Buddhist texts, at first you may not find you can understand everything or accept everything. And that's very normal. Like the man who was asking about rebirth, it's very common for people to find teaching on rebirth, karma and rebirth. They find some aspects of that difficult to accept in the beginning, and that's fine. You just keep practicing, but You have to be curious and examine it and reflect on it and learn from your experience. Compare your experience with what the Buddha said, or compare your experience with what a teacher has taught you. And over time, you will grow that way. So it's all okay to keep an open mind and to have this sense that, you don't just believe everything, but you put it to the test. Only when you put it to the test, then you may say, what this teacher has said really does seem to work, seems to be correct. Well, then you'll get more confidence over time. But put things to the test. Don't just accept something. Because if you just accept on the level of belief, well, you're not really knowing or understanding for yourself, are you? So all good teachers will encourage you to go off and practice, and then maybe come back over time, compare notes, seek further clarification, fair enough, but then go away and practice again until you know for yourself.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question here goes. Hi Ajahn, I have noticed if anger comes to my mind and I am not mindful and I don't observe it, it is only anger existing where I don't exist. When I am not mindful like this, only the condition exists on its own. Is this correct?
I have noticed. Just read it again.
Hi Ajahn, I've noticed if anger comes to my mind and if I don't observe it, or if I'm not mindful, it is only anger that exists where I don't exist.
Where, say that again, where
I don't exist. I don't exist. So it seems like
if you're not mindful, then you attach to that anger, you identify with it, you become angry when you're not mindful. Because if you are truly mindful, then your wisdom, your insight can function. You can see anger is impermanent suffering and not self. And anyone in their right mind, meaning anyone with mindfulness and insight, would not wish to cling on or identify with the anger because they know it's suffering. This is why we keep developing mindfulness. Out of the mindfulness, wisdom can function. Because when you're mindful, you pay attention. So say you become angry or you're becoming angry, that's come about because of a moment of delusion, isn't it? You're not fully mindful, you're not fully understanding a situation, so you start to react out of habit, out of conditioning with anger. But as soon as you establish mindfulness, you become aware that when you're angry, you feel bad, you feel pain, stressed, your thinking becomes very negative and destructive. Mentally and physically, you're affected in a negative way by anger. As you become mindful, your wisdom starts to see that, and then it's only natural that the next thing you want to do is abandon the anger, because you can see you're suffering, you're in suffering because of this anger, therefore let it go. And you'll also see that it can be let go of because it's temporary in its nature. It's a mental condition that's arisen, is there, but also passes away. And if you notice anger, when you are angry, you start to bring in mindfulness, because you say if you practice mindfulness for a while and then you turn to become more mindful when you're getting angry, you'll notice, what is anger? Well, there's feelings, but those feelings arise and cease. They're changing all the time. The thoughts that come when you're angry arise and cease. As soon as you start to apply mindfulness and investigate it, your whole relationship to anger changes. It may take time, of course, because anger is a very strong conditioning force, but your relationship changes. You become more detached, and you realize you don't have to follow this anger, hold on to this anger. You can let it go. And the more you see that, the more you realize that, the quicker you'll let it go. So then it will bother you less and less. So number one, bring up the mindfulness as quickly as possible. Even if you're already angry, just try and remember, go away and establish mindfulness rather than indulge your anger and argue or do something distractive. Try and find a way to bring up the mindfulness as quickly as you can.
Sadhu, sadhu. Next question is, Dear Ajahn, how do I advise or guide a relative who perceives himself as having crossed the shore, when his speech and actions clearly don't come across as one who has achieved Sotapanna?
Well, probably your goal might be to try and get that person to meet with a teacher who is skilled and maybe can guide them through or out of their delusion. It's quite possible you, as a relative, because of that connection, it may actually be quite hard for you to do it. So, like with everyone, you practice compassion, kindness with this person. You wish them well. And so if you truly wish them well, you may sense this person is deluded because they claim one thing, but their actions don't match what they claim. You see that, so you see they're actually very deluded, probably harming themselves, at least on a subtle level. They've got wrong views and attachments there that they're not seeing. So out of your compassion and kindness, you want them to receive teachings and change for the better, improve for the better. So you may have to accept, perhaps you're not the person to do it, but you may try and steer them towards a teacher. Until that happens, you may also have to practice a lot of equanimity yourself, because this person, you may feel sorry for them or maybe annoyed with them perhaps. You may have a number of different reactions coming up, but there's not much you can do perhaps until they've met someone who can really teach them. You may have to practice a lot of equanimity, and you wish them well in your meditation. You wish that they realize where they're going wrong and change their behavior and meet with a good teacher. You may have that aspiration in your meditation, and you send your thoughts of kindness to them with that aspiration. But until that happens, you may have to just be very equanimous and accept, this is a difficult situation, there's not much I can do. But if you can think of any way to get them to hear the Dhamma and meet with a good teacher, that would be ideal.
Sadhu. Another question here goes, Yoniso Manasikara is said to be an important aspect of Dhamma practice for a beginner, yet little is understood of it. Could Ajahn please explain how to practice Yoniso Manasikara in different situations? Thank you.
Well, we translate that as reasoned reflection or wise reflection, using your intelligence, using your mind to examine and understand what you're doing, what you're involved with in any situation at any moment. So we've just been talking about that. Say with anger, you can bring up, as soon as you establish mindfulness, when you're getting angry or you have been angry and you've now established some mindfulness, some awareness, you become aware, I've been angry now, I've been talking or thinking or doing something in anger. You may begin to reflect in a reasoned way or in a wise way back on that experience and say, well, how did I get angry there? What happened? What was going on? And I'd recommend you to do this as part of your practice. When you're more quiet and the anger has subsided enough and you're mindful enough, then reflect back. Well, how did it arise? Maybe there's a certain situation that triggers your anger. You meet with a certain person and it always makes you angry because of their habit or past karma, past things that have happened with them, or the way they talk, their behavior tends to trigger anger in you. So you're reflecting back, well, that tends to be the trigger. I see that person or hear them talk, or it may be a certain situation that happens. So you're meditating and you get a pain in your leg and you start to feel irritation or aversion because of the pain. And it's something you've seen before. So you reflect back, oh, this pain arises, I feel it. then I start to think in a negative way, and then I start to become angry. Or I meet that person, they do their thing, and I start to react with aversion. So thinking things through, as it were, but with a purpose. You're trying to understand cause and effect. What leads to what? And then, of course, also thinking what solutions, what can you do in that situation? And you may prepare a plan of action or a strategy for the next time something similar happens. You may also decide to develop preventative action. Say, well, I'm always getting angry when I'm with that person or in that situation. Now I'm going to cultivate metta bhavana, cultivate the meditation on goodwill regularly, and particularly maybe directed to a person, or in a situation where you know you might get angry, to consciously bring up the thought of metta, to prepare yourself and maybe prevent anger arising in the first place, or soften it if it is arising. So thinking things through with the purpose of ending suffering, understanding things better, understanding cause and effect, with the aim to assist your own mind in letting go of defilements which cause suffering, in this case anger. Or, the way the Buddha trained the monks, in the way you use things in your daily life. Say you put on clothes. Remind yourself, why do I wear clothes? To keep warm, to protect me from the weather, for modesty, because if you don't wear clothes, people would, look at you and laugh at you if you were naked or whatever. There are reasons why we wear clothes. So when you put on clothes, remind yourself of that, because your mind tends to get caught into the other aspects of, say, clothes and, the fashion, the color, the way it looks, and we form all kinds of opinions and desires based on that, which are actually not that helpful to us. They're a cause of suffering. But if you bring in the wise reflection, clothes are just clothes to keep me warm, keep me protected, that brings your mind, it grounds you, doesn't it? Grounds you in reality, it brings you back to the truth, the deeper truths that clothes are just made up of physical elements, and then just a way of using physical elements to keep the body healthy, warm, protected, and so on. The same with your home, the things you use. You have a home to just protect you from the weather. It's a place where you can be secure, safe, live your life in a secure way, protected from the weather, from other people, and so on. That's really the purpose of a home, more than having a 5-star home, or a good home, or a bad home, or a home that you find beautiful or ugly, or you like or you don't like. When we lose yoniso manasikara, we tend to just react with craving and get caught into our moods and our likes and dislikes. Same with food. Why do we eat food? To be healthy, to give ourselves energy, to do more good in our lives, to do the things we need to do. But so often with eating food because we like this, we don't like that, we have our opinions, our views about food, we have hang-ups about food, we have attachments about food. When we don't use yoniso manasikara, food can become a big problem, or it can become a distraction or a big attachment in our life. When you use yoniso manasikara with food, you're starting to just see the real purpose, true purpose of food, how to eat food with a wise, skillful attitude, and so on. You can apply yoniso manasikara to your state of mind, to how your body is, to your job if you have a job, to your studies if you're studying, to your the things you use, how you spend money, how you save money, how you spend money. All of this can become subject matter for wise reflection. And it should be. The Buddha encouraged us to develop wise reflection through our life. And it's always with the aim to understand things better and to end suffering. There's a goal to it, there's a purpose to it.
Sadhu Luang Por. Do we have time for 5 more questions?
Yep. Let's keep going.
Okay. Does the 5 precepts in core Buddhist teaching exist before, or is it a derived concept so that we don't make any harm to society? How practical is it to live following the 5 precepts, even though purposely we don't like to kill animals? For example, pest control in a new house. How to balance this out and live accordingly?
Well, the 5 precepts are a code of practice that the Buddha encouraged people wishing to free their mind from the mental defilements to follow. So it's coming from an enlightened mind, the mind of enlightened Buddha. He's just saying, these guidelines, when you follow, will prevent you from making extreme negative karma, and you'll have a freedom of remorse, a certain kind of ease and happiness of mind, which is very supportive for developing deeper insight into the truth to free your mind from greed, anger, and delusion. So on the one hand, you can say, yeah, well, there are a code, a set of guidelines that we can put down on paper, so they're just concepts, external concepts that you follow, rules, you might say, to follow. But there's other aspects to it, aren't there? Like the 5 precepts, the Buddha didn't force anyone to keep the 5 precepts, and he always said you can't force anyone to keep them. They have to be taken on voluntarily. You need wisdom, or yoniso manasikara, to see the value and the wisdom of keeping the 5 precepts, why it's valuable for you. So you learn through experience. Most of us learn through experience that when you don't keep the 5 precepts, you tend to make a lot of negative karma, which comes back on you, causes you mental pain, even physical pain, risks. There's all kinds of consequences that come back when we don't follow the 5 precepts. When we do follow them, we do away with a lot of those unwished for, unpleasant consequences. There are always a few situations which are kind of hard to know maybe instantly what the right thing to do is. Like you say, sometimes you're challenged. There's ants in your kitchen. What do I do? How you deal with this? But what I'd recommend is start with the 5 precepts as your guideline for behavior, and just say, well, how can I keep the 5 precepts in this situation, even though it's challenging? You've got ants in your cupboards or all over your kitchen. Can I deal with the ants without killing them? Because I want to preserve life, because I'm practicing kindness and compassion, which these 5 precepts bring up. How can I do it? And, this is something that monks are encountering every day. You learn to maybe sweep ants. You learn to clean up, reduce the things that attract the ants by keeping your place clean. You maybe do some preventative works to reduce the entrance ways for ants into your room or your kitchen or whatever. You also practice a lot of equanimity. So sometimes you realize, well, you can be there with ants and they just get on and do their thing, you do your thing, and it's not the end of the world just living with a few ants sometimes. There's different reflections, different practices you can introduce where you deal with the problem but without breaking the precept. And over time, you learn to protect your precepts because you love the benefits of the precepts, the peace of mind, the freedom from guilt, remorse, regret. And you also become wiser and understand better through experience how you can keep the precepts in all these different situations. If you refuse to go for after work drinks with your colleagues, it's not the end of the world. They're not necessarily going to sack you or look down on you. You may get a bit of teasing or comments at first, but over time, generally the opposite happens. When you keep the 5 precepts, people respect you. So if you don't drink with your colleagues at work, maybe over time, they actually respect you more. If you don't tell lies, people respect you. If you're true to your partner, you don't cheat on your partner tends to respect you and love you more, generally. If you don't steal, you don't have to worry about the police or your neighbors coming after you. If you don't kill, maybe the good karma you generate from not killing will actually solve the majority of your problems with ants and other things. And this is what monks prove all the time. When you meet a poisonous snake or a tiger or an elephant or a bear or something that can kill you, or even a person who may be very aggressive, you go back to your precepts. I don't kill. I haven't killed for decades. Even animals I don't kill. I don't have the intention to kill. You go back on that in these challenging situations. Often it leads to a good outcome. The Buddha said your precepts protect you. I've proven that over and over again. I mean, sure, you never know what might happen, but generally speaking, you meet threatening animals or people, and if you're keeping the precepts, the threat is sorted out in some way that you're not actually hurt or harmed in the end. It just seems to happen like that. So I would say give the precepts a chance. They're guidelines. You have to take them on voluntarily. No one forces you to. But if you can see the wisdom of keeping precepts, give them a chance, and they'll only bring you good things.
Sarolungpo. And there is a specific example in the question, what about termites in a new house?
Well, that's why the building code makes you do termite protection before you build. Try and build your house well so that the termites can't get in from day one, and then you don't have any problems. We built many kutis here in the forest, which is full of termites, but because we do the termite protection before we build or as we build, then they've never come up into our kutis. 22 years. They're around us, but they don't bother us. So look into skillful building methods. That would be one way to deal with them. There are ways to prevent termites coming into your building. Just try and plan ahead.
Sadhu. Next question. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. As a lay follower, I was looking for a teacher for quite some time, as well as practicing mostly on my own. I meditate, watch and listen to the Dhamma, going on retreats, etc., but I feel stuck. I really appreciate the notion regarding the sincerity of practices. I recall the resolve that I picked up from the stories of Arahants who were ready to give up their lives, and some of them did, in the name of the Dhamma, to become enlightened. So that is definitely part of the answer. But along with that, what would be the most straightforward way of finding a teacher who could be interested in having a student and the one who could help progress on the path?
Well, as far as teachers go, you have to make a bit of effort. You have to travel to see them. I mean, online is a start, and if you already know a teacher in person, well, then maybe you can also continue the student-teacher relationship online. But I would make the effort to physically go and find teachers, go and stay with them. So probably, generally speaking, the best teachers are monks and nuns. Not always, there are some good lay teachers as well, but go out and stay in monasteries, places where other people are practicing, what we call Kalyano Mitta. You have to go and find them, visit them, stay with them, do retreats. Like you said, you've done some retreats, we'll do some more. Actually go and stay in these places, really learn the Dhamma, really put that effort in. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. So, of course, if your Dhamma practice is mainly just watching a screen, whether it's YouTube or something live like this, that's good. But there's always a bit of distance there, isn't there? Because it's a screen. If you're actually in person, you'll probably get a better experience. Your teacher can really know you better, see you, respond to you, maybe give you teachings that are very specific for you personally. So I'd put that effort in to go out, find the teachers, spend time with them.
Sadhu. Next question. Whatever my father does, my mother criticizes and complains a lot, and sometimes verbally bullies him. Seeing this every single time only brings more irritation towards her behavior. I don't know how to have more upekkha towards my mother.
Practice, just use the mantra, Mum is always right. Just use that all the time. Mum is right, Mum is right. Even when Mum is wrong, Mum is right. You really have to go beyond this always complaining about parents. You know, they brought you up, they brought you into the world, brought you up. Sure, you have differences of opinion, different behaviors, and you know, they got to work their problems out as well. So husband and wife or mum and dad, they have to work out their own relationship. That's their job. But you have to work out your relationship to them and just appreciate the good that they've done, bringing you up, helping you. I don't know how old you are or where you are but in your life, but just appreciate them for what they've done. Try and remember all the good things about them. See what you can do to help them. You know, they may need help as they get older, physical help. Help them to understand the Dhamma. If you can, take them on retreats or to monasteries, that would be great. And just appreciate them with gratitude and do what you can to help them. And as far as these kind of petty differences and character weaknesses and so on, don't think too much about it. Just wish them well.
Sadhu. Next question. During meditation, how do I discern between true insight and intellectual knowledge?
True insight doesn't disappear, and it helps you to remove certain mental defilements rooted in greed, anger, and delusion, various wrong views, wrong thinking, anger, hatred, jealousy, rage, stubbornness, laziness. All kinds of different mental defilements are removed by insight. Intellectual knowledge is a start, and it's a necessary thing. You listen, you read the Dhamma, but it doesn't remove defilement, does it? You finish reading that book, you're still at starting point. The actual practice of the Dhamma to develop what we call bhavana maya panya, insight that comes from mindfulness, a mind that has mindfulness, that is still, is quiet, is in a wholesome state. That kind of insight will actually see through defilement, see a defilement as a defilement, know that its nature is defiling. Your mind is defiled by greed, anger, and delusion and all their offshoots. And there's no doubt about it. Because your mind is still, there's clarity, there's no doubt. So then you will definitely let go of defilements, abandon them. You don't want them in the mind. So insight leads to that. It leads to peace. The more insight you have, the more peace, the more joy, the more rapture you have. You know, intellectual knowledge may give you a little burst of joy. Oh, you read something that makes sense. You know, you get some faith, you get some joy still, but it's very short-lived. Insight is profound. It's long-lived. You know, insight can give rise to piti and sukha, joy, and you know, deep states of peace and happiness that may last days, months, and ultimately, because insight never leaves you, your mind is always a little bit peaceful. Even if you still have some mental defilements left and they're arising, there'll be part of the mind that's always got some peace in it. So it's self-sustaining.
Sadhu Lumpur. The last question for tonight goes, when meditating in the jungle or away from much human interaction, how do you verify you have developed skills, as when there are no human interactions, e.g. no anger, etc., which usually comes when we interact with more people in society? How do we verify we have developed skills?
Well, again, you know, you may spend long periods in retreat or in the jungle or in a cave or somewhere, but you do still refer to your teacher. So that's one thing. You go and see your teacher. Even if you've been on retreat, you'll spend time seeing a teacher, meeting other practitioners from time to time, which helps to give you balanced view and give you feedback on your own practice. But don't forget, just because you're alone in the jungle or a cave or some quiet place, you still got your mind, you still got your mental defilements. They'll come up. Then you may just, you get angry with the ants rather than your work colleagues. You may have fear about a tree falling on your head or catching a disease or meeting a wild animal rather than fear of your boss or fear of your partner or fear of your neighbor. Actually, the basic kind of human emotions are still at work, even if you're on your own. So you can still reflect on them, work to bring up the mindfulness, let go of them. And as you practice more, you get more experience with it. You're aware that there's defilement there or not. And if you're in doubt, well, you go and see teachers or meet with fellow practitioners, and you do get feedback. And then from time to time, you come out of your more secluded environment, and you will travel and meet people and be in situations that maybe possibly stimulate defilements. To be honest, in this day and age, there's probably very few situations where you're totally alone and totally secluded. You'll always have a little bit of engagement with other people. Sooner or later, it will happen. And like you say, that often brings up loves and hates and all kinds of desires and reactions. So I think you'll find that you can still reflect on these things and know whether your practice is progressing, whether you're becoming more peaceful, more insightful, or just less and more attached and more deluded. But if in doubt, you go and see a teacher. The teacher will help.
Sadhu Luang Por. That is all the questions for tonight.
Okay, well, very nice talking to you, with you. I hope it was useful for you, and wish you all to keep practicing and progress in your practice.